Familiar sight as Miami's offense was absolutely abysmal. Just 88 points in the year 2024. And the Heat season is on the brink as they lose again at home to the Celtics. There's nothing else to say, but we break it all down anyway on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com. Joining me as always, credentialed Heat media member David Ramil. However you're tuning in, on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Recording this after the Heat lost to the Celtics 102-88, another blowout where the Celtics basically led from start to finish after the first few minutes. The Heat have been outscored by 44 points in the series. They're down 3-1. David, I was at the arena, came back home to record. I have some observations that I want to get to from the game, but my big takeaway, before we get to any of that, is that the Heat just don't have enough talent, and that has basically showed the entire series, except for Game 2 when they shot 50% and Joe Mazzulla did his best job to try to sabotage his own team with a terrible defensive game plan. I know you and I sort of disagree on the definition of talent, but do you at least agree with me here? What's your takeaway from all of this?
I don't know how much credit I give Boston. I don't care. I mean, we're going to get some response from Celtics fans. I don't know. Go sleep with your cousin or something, whatever you people do. I know it's going to sound like sour grapes and everything else like that. It's fine. I'm just like, at this point, like Miami and anybody who says anything positive about Miami, it doesn't matter, right? Like you're going to get the series win. That was probably never really in doubt. Miami was shorthanded and they've been shorthanded. And it's just what, it was never going to be a winnable series for Miami. That they could have made it more competitive. Yeah, I think that's the case. And I think that what Boston did today, as effective as it might have been defensively, and to have Derek White go for a playoff career high 38 points, most of those shots unguardable. Like, I mean, he was just unconscious and taking shots that he's a good player and everything else like that. But those were like,
he's not a 38 point per game scorer. Yeah.
That is not the case. Yeah. Aside from all that, though, in terms of Miami's offense, like it's the same problems they've had all year, and yet still the same concerns from us is that, a lot of those shots were makeable. A lot of things that they did seemed fine, at least in theory, that should have worked, and the shots just didn't fall for Miami. And so, that's my big takeaway from all this is that Miami, whether you want to call it talent or not, their shots didn't fall. And maybe that's overly simplistic, but I think that's a big part of it. I know you defined it to me via text. You said, the ability to generate offense. Well, maybe it's just because, Jason Tatum is tall enough to get those shots over anybody, and they have basic size and anything else. And you've got, 6'4" Haywood Highsmith trying to generate some offense. You've got short arm Tyler Hero trying to generate offense. You've got 6'9" Bam Adebayo as your quote unquote center. Like Miami's just undersized, and they just can't seem to generate any offense easily. And what offense they could, those shots did not fall. Yeah. And that's across the board. I rewatched video very quickly on the NBA.com site, watched a video of a lot of those from Jaime Jaquez, from Nico, from everybody. Like those shots are absolutely makeable. And there were open shots. Some of them were contested and yet still could have fallen. Like, I mean, Jaime Jaquez missing a number of layups. And I know that he got hurt later on, but even pre-injury, it was not a good game for anybody. So look, it's not that I'm taking away credit from Boston necessarily, but I also am giving a lot of blame to Miami for where they are right now in this series, considering how badly they played.
Outside of Game 2, they've shot 20% on three-pointers in this series. And so even if you take an average three-point shooting performance, it's better than 20%. And it's sort of the other side of that coin from the lightning that they caught in a bottle in the last postseason, where everybody was shooting career highs in the playoffs. And this is sort of the other version of that. I guess my biggest rub up against when people say, oh, well, they missed a bunch of makeable shots. And that's true. But are they makeable for really good NBA players? Or like the Heat played Patty Mills and DeLon Wright, who are fine players, but guys who got cut by the Hawks and the Wizards for 50 minutes in this game. I mean,
Yeah,
at
I
some
get that.
point, the talent is the talent, and sometimes talent is the ability to make shots consistently, right? And it just feels like to me, we're not, when we talk about, okay, like they missed a bunch of shots that they normally could make, and if they make those shots, then maybe this series looks a little bit different. To me, what this means is, no, that's not what. It's not just make the shots that are makeable. It's they need to get outlier performances from these role players
That's
in
fair.
order to compete. And if it's an outlier performance, then it's an outlier performance for a reason. By definition, it's not in sort of the usual realm of what these players are doing and are capable of doing 4 games out of 7, right? And so that is, to me, where the talent comes from. And you mentioned, like, maybe it's just height, maybe it's athleticism. Yeah, it's all these things. It's just natural shooting touch, God-given shooting touch, God-given height and wingspan and all these things. And it just feels like right now the Heat have done an amazing job developing some of these guys and these role players, and even developing guys that they got at the end of the lottery, like Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero. But Tyler was picked at the end of the lottery because of that short wingspan, because of his limitations physically. Bam was picked at 13 for very similar reasons, right? You mentioned just him being undersized. Like, him being this good was never part of the equation for Bam Adebayo. The fact that he is this good is incredible in and of itself.
Yes.
But you see now with the Celtics, they take Tatum and Jaylen Brown, both in the top 3 of the draft. They've got first-round picks up and down that roster. They got a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, who is not better than Bam Adebayo, but has been a huge factor for them in their season so far. And it just feels like their young guys, especially Tatum and Brown, have just reached, or at least started to reach, their ceilings that are simply higher than the ceilings of Miami's young players.
Mhm.
And that was not necessarily the case in the years past when this rivalry kind of started, but it really
Well,
feels that way now. Because we know what Tyler Hero is. We kind of know what Bam Adebayo is, at least as an offensive and a defensive player, and that is a top 20 player. But Jaylen Brown is, or Jason Tatum's flirting with being a top 10 player. Most people would put, he's probably in that category. Jaylen Brown is flirting with being a top 20 player in the league. Like, the Heat, like, they're just starting to hit those ceilings that these guys that the Heat drafted at the end of the lottery simply don't have. And it's not as simple as, well, end of the lottery, first of the lottery. But in this case, it feels like that's what's happening.
yeah, I guess. I mean, look, it's also, it's a really tough spot. And I say this, and I know a lot of people might think, oh, there's a bias involved or anything else like that. I mean, I don't know how you can watch any basketball and not have some sort of a bias. The reality is, however, this series, I think, would be very different if Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier were out there. Like, and that's Patty Mills wouldn't be playing. DeLon Wright
Right.
might not be playing. Guys that we've seen, even Josh Richardson, who, he was expected to be a factor, and he was playing his best basketball season right before he got hurt. Could he have been a factor? Maybe, but either way, he's they're not available now, and he might not have been one of those guys that's playable. And Miami's now in this situation where they don't have those guys who can slow down the offense or generate easy buckets. I don't know that anybody would look at Jimmy Butler and claim that he was a talented player, like by that definition that you're using as a top 5 draftee or anything like that. Like, he was obviously last pick in the first round, things of that sort. He had to work his way up. That's just the nature of who this Jimmy is as a player, and how this Heat team operates is they just work for everything.
Yeah, but
And
there's
it's
nobody
worked
on
for
this
Miami.
Yeah, but that's not, Jimmy Butler is an outlier, but he is a star, and we knew he was a
Yes,
star before the Heat even
for sure.
signed him. Like, he wasn't
Yes.
what he ended up being, but we knew what he was. Like, there's a reason why he was sitting down with Rachel Nichols, in a
Yes.
surprise ESPN interview. This
Yes.
guy's a star. And so, however you got to go get your stars, you got to go get your stars. And we'll have our offseason conversation sort of
Oh, yes.
later on in the show. But I just, you're absolutely right. Like, the series looks different if you have Jimmy and you have Terry Rozier. It does. But part of why you don't get into the play-in tournament is so that you don't lose Jimmy Butler in the second game of the play-in tournament. And this team wasn't good enough in the regular season to escape the play-in tournament. And maybe you want to chalk that up to injuries too. And that's certainly a big part of what kind of bit Miami this season. But
It's been a bad year.
It's been 2 years now in the lottery. And it's like, okay, how many excuses do we have for being in the lottery? And yeah, you make the NBA finals one year, but you were, or not the lottery, I'm sorry, the play-in tournament. There's 2 years in a
Yes.
row of being in the play-in tournament. That's not good enough. And when you flirt with danger that much, you're going to get bit, right? And the Heat didn't get bit last year, but they nearly did. But thank God for Max Strus going off for 31 points against the Bulls in the second play-in game. And then they got bit in this one when Kelly Oubre fell on Jimmy Butler's knee. And that if you're not playing that week, that doesn't if you're not playing that week, that doesn't happen. And Jimmy Butler is at least available for a series against for a playoff series. And they don't have that. And so it just feels like to me the levee finally broke. Like the Heat have been kind of
flirting with disaster.
Flirting with disaster, band-aiding with these like developmental projects and a Haywood Highsmith here and a Gabe Vincent there, and we don't really have a point guard, and now we do, and all the like a Kevin Love off the buyout, like all that stuff is really cool. But when you're relying on Haywood Highsmith isolation possessions against Jason Tatum in a playoff series against the number 1 seed in the East, not ideal. That's not what he was groomed to do. But because of the injuries and the things that got them here, that's sort of the result. Anyway, we'll keep talking about this game. We'll talk about some of the injuries that happened. The Heat down 3-1 now in this series. Is there any hope of coming back? Is there any hope of getting a win in Boston? We'll talk about all of that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Listen, Mother's Day is right around the corner, just a couple of weeks from now. Do you want to make mom smile? Do you want to make her day as special as you possibly can? Well, you can make Mother's Day a better one than ever before with flowers or maybe even some gifts from her favorite brands or whatever store she loves. You get them delivered that very same day with DoorDash. That's right, DoorDash. It got everything that you need. Get all of your Mother's Day gifts all in one place. And get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flowers, convenience, or grocery or retail order now, but only if you use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms do apply. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Hey, Heat fans listening to this show on YouTube, do us a favor. I know the Heat lost, but let's just mess with Locked On Celtics anyway. Go into the comments section on John Corrales' post-game show where he's going to be talking about this is the Celtics. This is how we knew we always had them.
I do not advocate this.
Go in there and say Heat and 6. Just go in there and say Heat and 6. Is that good? Or what else could we get? Living rent free?
Heat and 6? No, it's going to be Heat and 7, right? At this point.
Oh, no,
right?
Heat and 7. Yeah, that's Heat and 7, or do we go Heat and 7? Let's go Heat and 7.
Rent free is good. They're not going to accomplish anything beyond that. Yeah,
Heat and 7, rent free. Go in the comments, flood them. I want to see. I'm going to check.
Jimmy's still your daddy. I don't know. Whatever. You got to go. Get creative.
Tell them it doesn't count. Tell them it doesn't count because Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier in a case. Tell them that you didn't accomplish anything. Hey, congrats. You beat Patty Mills. The asterisk. Yeah. Congrats on your asterisk. That'd be funny. I'm going to check tomorrow afternoon. Go in there and do it. All right. I've got a few other notes that I want to get to here. I do want to just say, let's knock out the injury part of this first, just because it matters, I guess, because there's still games to be played. Kristaps Porzingis, he's seen in a walking boot after the game. He tweets that he's going to be good. What does that mean to me? Absolutely nothing. To me, the walking boot is more material than a tweet. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to guess he does not play Game 5. The big question is whether or not Jason Tatum plays.
He'll play.
I think he's going to play. That's play, but you never know with the ankle and stuff like that. But my guess is he plays.
I don't know if you saw as much as the discourse as I have, but it is so patently ridiculous for people that didn't catch the game or whatever. There was a foul by Patty Mills, and I can't recall exactly. I think he shoved Derek White. Stoppage of play as a result, and then Bam had been guarding Jason Tatum, so the game was dead. The shot clock was dead, and Tatum, because he's a clown ass, shoots a 3-pointer from 28 feet away just for nothing. And then Bam kind of lazily puts his hands up and then strolls towards Tatum, and his feet slides under, and Tatum rolls his ankle as a result.
So I saw it all sort of happen from Media Row, and it didn't look good. And you knew immediately, right away, I'm like, oh, this is going to suck. Like the narrative on this, like, oh, great. Now I have to log off of Twitter again for an entire day because now the whole thing about Bam being a dirty player and all of this is going to crop back up on social media. And it's the least interesting version of basketball conversation that exists for me, is whether or not a play that has happened is dirty or not. Like, we saw it happen. It happened. They got him a flagrant. I don't care. I don't care that he got called for the flagrant. I don't know that I agree with it, but I don't care about it. It didn't make any difference in the game.
You're
I
right.
literally don't care.
Although,
It's like trying to judge the
have they
intent
cut
of
the
a
lead?
player and be in
Cut
their
the lead to
brain.
13 to cut the lead to 13, and then they go
Oh,
off on a 6-0 run right afterwards, right? I mean, was that a momentum shifting play in Boston's favor? Were they crumbling?
No,
I don't know.
they were not. Every
All right.
time the Heat
Probably
got
not.
back, Derek White made some sort of big bucket. Like, the Heat were never getting back in that game. Although I will say this is my big observation from being at the game tonight. I am, and this might sound strange after the Heat just got blown out for the third time in this series, but I'm really proud of Heat fans and the way they showed up for tonight's game. I have not been more impressed with a crowd at Kaseya Center than I have been tonight. It was the most impressed I was with the crowd since I've started covering the Heat. And I don't say that lightly.
I don't know.
I'm telling you,
you saw it.
I was
But
there every time.
The crowd was with like 2 minutes left in the game.
Well, the game was over.
Like,
I could care less if you lose. It's a 20-point game with 2 minutes left. Go home. But what they earned it. They earned it for the first 46 minutes. Like, every time the Heat got within 20 points, like as soon as it was like a 19 or 18-point game, the Let's Go Heat chants, the Let's Go Heat chants were like it was like they had just taken the lead on a big 3-pointer. It was so loud, and I was so struck by it. I really was. I was like proud, and every time the Celtics fans, and there was a large, portion of Celtics fans there, every time they tried to get a Let's Go Celtics chant going, they were drowned out right away. The Celtics never made their presence felt in that arena. And I thought that the Heat fans are now starting to kind of reflect the players themselves, and I find that interesting in that even when the Heat are down by 20, and everybody will say this, they don't give up, right? Like, even to the very end, Caleb Martin just heaving 3-pointers when the game was obviously over with 40 seconds left. But even before that, like, trying to claw back into this thing over and over and over again, giving it all. Patty Mills just being out there down 30 points or whatever it was in the third quarter and screaming at his teammates to try to hype him up. That's Kevin Love pulling Caleb Martin to the side over and over again, being like, "Hey, this is how you're going to cover me up. This is how you're going to cover for me defensively," and all these things. Like, the Heat don't really give up, and fans do. Like, just fans. I'm not talking about Heat fans, but fans generally do, and that's like their job is just to show up and be entertained. They don't have a job, but you kind of hit another level as a fan base when you have a performance like I thought the Heat fans had tonight. Like, I was so impressed. They never gave up. And I've just never seen that from a Heat fan base. It wasn't like that in the playoffs last year, though. It wasn't.
I think it was. It
No.
didn't have to be. They were winning.
Well, no, that's true. That's true. But
They
had every reason
but they've seen enough comebacks, though. Like, they've seen enough comebacks
That's what I'm saying.
from this team. Yeah, no, I get it.
This team has imbued belief into the fan base, and that's why the fan base, I'm telling you, multiple times, 18-point game. It was like Tyler Hero hit a 3-pointer to take the lead.
Right before that flagrant, when they cut down to 13, like, the camera views panning to the crowd, and the noise was, you could hear it clearly coming even through the TV. Like, it was, you could see that there was an energy shift there. And however unlikely, with 5.5 minutes at that point, the belief that maybe they could stage a comeback, there was a belief.
And it wasn't just like in a response to what the Heat were doing. It was actively pushing the Heat. It was, you guys need something, and we're going to give it to you. I'm not like cheesy guy like this. This is not my wheelhouse. So the fact that I'm even saying this, it really was, it was striking, and it was just like
an
observation
surprising
that was
too,
inescapable.
Considering Miami's record this season has been terrible at home. They've lost like 85 playoff games at home in a row, dating back to the finals and conference finals last year against these same Celtics. Like, they have not seen a playoff win from this team since May of last year. Like, it's been a year.
Yeah. That's on the team, though. That's not on the fans. Like, I don't know what that is.
That is on the team.
Like,
exactly.
I don't know what's going on. So the fans deserve something. And it last thing on the fans, because I don't even know how interesting this is, but the players after the game, Eric Spoelstra and the players after the game kept talking about, we want to win one in Boston because we want to try to get one for the fans here. So I think it was for them to go out of their way also to talk about the fans in a way that they don't usually do that. I think they noticed something similar to what I noticed there at the arena.
7, let's do it.
won't go that far.
That's
All
what
right.
they're talking about, right? That's basically the gist of it. They want to win one in Boston so
Who,
they
the
can bring the
players?
series back
Yes,
here.
of course they're going to say that. Yes, no, they're not going to go in there like, yeah, we're probably going to lose this one in Boston, but it was a hell of a ride, like, yeah, of course they're going to say that. That's the messaging, of course, yeah.
The Celtics fans are trying to spin this now, despite whatever we heard differently over the 3 days in between Game 2 and 3, that this was the plan all along because their longtime play-by-play man was Tom Gorman. Maybe I'm Mike Gorman. I'm not sure who the name.
Gorman.
I got that
Yeah.
mistaken. Yeah, Gorman. Yeah. He's retiring at the end of the season.
Yeah.
Obviously, as they advance deeper into the playoffs, these series will no longer be carried by local television. So they wanted to give him one last game at home, and that's why it's a gentleman's sweep and not an outright 4-0 sweep, because they wanted to give him one last game to cover in Boston.
That's why Joe Mazzulla just coached up the soft closeouts in Game 2. Hey.
That's right. They allowed Miami to shoot 55%.
Good for them.
Just for Gorman.
Good for them.
Go for Gorman.
Good for Gorman. A lot of people feel like this is the best thing for the Heat because it could maybe generate some big changes in the offseason. The other side of that is, can the Heat use Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier as being hurt as an excuse and maybe avoid those changes? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time. Well, maybe for a little bit longer in the NBA and NHL. And, of course, Panthers won. They beat out the Lightning to advance. So enjoy that while you still can, Miami fans. Yes, they did. They did.
Let's go.
6-1. Let's go, Cats. Baseball's in full swing. Maybe not in Miami so much, but elsewhere around the Major League Baseball. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every game, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose, and you can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube on your favorite podcast app. Thanks to everybody who sent in questions using the hashtag AskLOHeat. You can follow us on Instagram, Locked On Heat. Email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. Longtime listener, Claudia, writes in. Who gets traded in the offseason? Is Bam untouchable, and will Jimmy get his extension? I'm going to go on a limb and say in the many years that Claudia's been listening to the show and writing in, this is the first time maybe she's ever asked about offseason moves during the playoffs. And if they've broken Claudia, I think they might have broken most
our
Heat
favorite
fans
lady
in general. Yes. I mean, there are Heat fans who are happy about this. Now, happy might be even a strong word, but just see the satisfied in, you know what? This team needs changes. Kill the season with fire. Let's go into the offseason. Let's get the reload started. Let's start talking about this stuff. But my question to you is, like, how do you feel about that? Is it too early for the trade talk? Like, where are we on this?
Yeah, it's absolutely too early. I don't care. I will have months of recycling the same conversations over and over again. And last year, they were fueled by optimism with the whole Damian Lillard trade possibility, and then maybe Drew Holiday, and then there were many different names that were being linked to Miami, none of which really panned out. And that's something you kind of have to hold as a reminder. You can make whatever inquiries you want to as a front office, as an organization. I don't think Miami didn't acquire any star that was available for lack of trying. It's just not so easy to pull these things off. And I think, again, there's like a large percentage of the fan base, or maybe just a very vocal percentage of the fan base, that is spoiled by 2010 and the idea that you can just simply exist and two top 5 players will sign with your team. Like, that does not happen. And on the flip side of that, you saw what happened in Phoenix. You can have all the talent in the world. You can have 3 very damn good players. Like, you put KD, Bradley Beal, maybe not at this stage, and he certainly crapped the bed. So that's a whole conversation for a different episode. Devin Booker, like, you have 2 of the top 10 players in the league in Booker and KD. Maybe that's a stretch of Book, but I mean, he's up there. Beal, certainly maybe a top 40 player still, even at this point in his career, although maybe that took a hit. Is that 50, top 50 player, let's say. Okay, maybe that's
Got to be
again,
available. Like I got him
in
like
the
70s.
off season, he was a top 50 player,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
and that's when Miami was allegedly linked to Beal, or the possibility of acquiring him was a reality. And having that talent in the roster doesn't guarantee anything. And they're going to point to the coaching, and they're going to point to a general malaise amongst that team. But you know what? It didn't work out. They got swept. They got swept by a damn good Minnesota team. And so,
but give Spoelstra that roster. Give Spoelstra a top 5 player. I want to see what he could do when he's able to run Kevin Durant in isolation instead of Haywood Highsmith in isolation. Like, give him.
It's still too early to have this conversation. It's still too early to have this conversation.
Fair,
Miami's going to be in the hunt for a star. They haven't stopped being in the hunt for a star. Like, again, and I've brought this point up before, and I'll continue to bring it up. They got the player they thought was necessary after they were swept by the Bucks in 2021. They got the point of attack defender in Kyle Lowry. They got a journeyman power forward that was going to stretch the floor and kind of play the same style that Jay Crowder had played for a couple seasons in Miami, and PJ Tucker. They got the big names. And they were the first seed in the Eastern Conference, and they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Then PJ left in free agency, and they kind of had to start over. But guess what? They got some unexpected boost from Max Strus, from Gabe Vincent, and everybody else, and they made the finals. Like, they've been competitive. They've been good. Has it been fun and easy to watch all the time? Well, maybe fun isn't the right word, because, again, success should be fun, however you get there. Has it been easy? It absolutely has not. And I'd say that's because of the stars on this team, specifically Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, and Jimmy Butler. The way they play, their styles of play, they're not going to make winning easy as your best 3 players. So if you're talking about breaking that up, that's fine. And that's a fine conversation to have eventually. But I also don't think that acquiring a star that's going to make things easy for Miami is a possibility. You're not going to trade Tyler Hero for Kevin Durant. You're not going to trade Tyler Hero for Devin Booker. You're not going to trade Jimmy Butler at his age for any star that's going to make this team infinitely more fun to watch or infinitely easier in terms of generating offense during an 82-game regular season. The only name that you can trade in order to make this team that much better is Bam Adebayo. And if you're trading Bam to acquire that star that can generate offense a little bit more easily and kind of grease the wheels on offense, well, then guess what? You're basically admitting to a rebuild, and that's not going to happen in this city. That's not going to happen with this front office so long as Pat Riley is running it. It's just not going to happen, period. And so you're going to have to reset your expectations a little bit. And maybe you can build around the edges. But guess what? Building around the edges and getting these kind of, like, people saying, oh, you need an Aaron Gordon type. Yeah, sure. Like, Aaron Gordon was just off, plucking off trees or anything like that. He was a top 5 pick, too, who was kind of just sitting there on his ass doing nothing for multiple years in Orlando. Guess what? I was there talking to Aaron Gordon, seeing him get frustrated and knowing that he was a much more versatile athletic player than what he was showing in Orlando. And he wasn't a very good player in Orlando. That's why he was available as easily as he was. And he's playing with the MVP that makes all these things happen. They already had their superstar. Miami does not have that superstar, and they're not going to get it this offseason. So sorry to put a damper on everybody's trade talk and building for the offseason. Maybe I've just killed half our listener base, but that's the reality. You're going to have to deal with it.
Do you think they can get Donovan Mitchell?
I don't know. Why? I mean, are they going to get booted out of the playoffs? Maybe. Orlando might make this a more interesting series. But either way, we've seen Donovan struggle.
Orlando's going to win this series.
That's a bold statement.
Is it?
And it's certainly a possibility. It's 2-2. I mean,
and the Cavs don't want to be here. Like, now that the Suns are out of the playoffs, the Cavs are wearing the crown of team that most doesn't want to be in the playoffs. They do not like each other. They don't. I don't know.
Miami was wearing it for in the third quarter today, so I don't know that. You
That's really true. Maybe they're like, we'll show you. What about Trae Young?
Absolutely not. Like, that's a reset of its own. Is Atlanta even in the playoffs? Or no?
Kevin Durant.
And what are you going to do to get Kevin Durant? Like, sure, I'd love it. I mean,
for KD straight up.
Yeah. Do you think Phoenix can take it at this point? I don't think you can make those salaries.
They can use some size,
They could use a spark, maybe.
They need help. They need help in transition.
Sure.
Jovic and Rozier. Yeah. Give Rozier to Phoenix. Give him a kind of pseudo point guard to get Devin Booker into the offense and initiate some stuff?
It's gonna save Frank Vogel's job there.
Probably not.
I don't like him being scapegoated, by the way, but that's just a whole other conversation. We should have that one on Locked On NBA.
I am. That's actually on my list of things on topics to talk about Locked On NBA. Brandon Ingram, the Pelicans just lost to the Thunder. They got swept. Feels like they're one of those wings.
That's not the name to
Would you
make
do Tyler
Miami.
Hero for Brandon Ingram?
I probably, just because it's a better fit, but he's not gonna make things that much easier either. Like that star just isn't there. I'm sorry,
Joel Embiid?
he just isn't. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your podcast app.